CityCast Boise is brought to you by WestVet. At WestVet, they know pets aren't like family, they are family. That's why they provide expert, compassionate veterinary care 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for cats and dogs. WestVet Boise and WestVet Meridian offer the region's most comprehensive emergency and specialty care from board-certified veterinarians and an expert caregiver team. WestVet can also help your pet with unexpected, non-critical conditions with their urgent care program. Visit westvet.net to find care you can count on from the team that is leading specialty healthcare for pets. Today on CityCast Boise, the city's new zoning code has only been in place for a week, but Boise State Public Radio's George Prentice is here to tell me why we might be feeling its impacts sooner than expected. Plus, we talk about Mayor McLean's visit to Dubai, our favorite movies, and why we can't recommend the new thriller Saltburn to everyone. It's Friday, December 8th. I'm Blake Hunter, and this is what Boise's talking about. Good morning, George. Thanks for coming on to CityCast Boise.
Thanks for the invite. Hi, Blake.
I want to dive into an interview that you did this week with Boise Mayor Lauren McLean. So you talked to her about this COP28 summit, which can you give just a brief explainer on what this is? Because it sounds a little bit confusing. But it's this global summit that's been going on for years. Can you tell us about it?
You bet. It is the official United Nations Climate Action Summit. And they meet now annually. And by the way, its very name is confusing, right? Why isn't it COP23?
Yeah.
So it's all about, 5-year goals, et cetera. But it was this summit that not too long ago came up with the benchmark of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if we can dial down the planet's warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius on a regular basis, we may have there may be a possibility of us actually living.
Right.
So it is, but it's everyone is invited to the table. And as fossil fuel addicted as we are as a planet, and in particular as superpowers are, you have a choice. You can either be in the room or not in the room. And after talking with Mayor McLean, who was actually in Dubai at this year's summit, and I'll talk about that in a second, I came back to my desk and I kept thinking back to Hamilton. I kept thinking back to the musical Hamilton and the song In the Room, right? And about how you have to lose pieces of the chess game, right, to get through. But you can be in there. Well, there's another saying. You can either be at the table or on the table. So my question to Mayor McLean was, what the heck are you doing in Dubai? And I understand the Mayor McLean, it's in her DNA to talk about sustainability and environmental action, et cetera. But flying to Dubai is an issue. So number one, right. How did you get there and who's picking up the tab? Well, it turns out that Bloomberg Philanthropies, huge NGO, right. Is funding a number of U.S. mayors and some governors to go to Dubai. Because at the end of the day, you can listen to King Charles all day long and President Biden and anyone else. But, where the rubber meets the road is at a municipal level, right? The mayors are going to probably affect more change or could affect more change than anybody else in the room. So she said, yeah. And obviously she was on the radar of Bloomberg. And they said, would you like to be included? And it was a really quick, fast yes. So she was invited along with the Public Works Director, Steve Burgos. So I had her on my program this week, live from Dubai, 11-hour difference. But I think we had a fair conversation about, first of all, who's picking up the tab. And I had to ask the obvious question is, do you not see the awful irony in holding this in Dubai, right? This this city this golden city built out of nothing that is basically built on fossil fuels. And she owned that as well. And she said, absolutely. As a matter of fact, she was coughing a couple times during the interview. And she said, I deal with the smog every day when I get on a train and go to this conference. Again, you can either be in the room or not in the room. So the United Nations, it turns out, chooses a different corner of the world every year to hold the conference. And Dubai obviously picked up the tab this year. And it's a little bit, if you think of it, it's a little bit like us, as in the city of Boise, having to deal with Idaho Power, right? We can wag our finger at them all day long for the years that they operated coal-fired plants, right? Or the fact that these dams are still, generating all this hydropower, or we can be at the table with them. So it was a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad that obviously, like you said, the kind of obvious question there is about why hold it in Dubai. Right. This like huge, it's a desert. It's completely grown off of fossil fuels. Right. And also, yes, I appreciate the analogy of being in the room or at the table, but also there are other ways to do it. Flying people from around the world. Maybe we can do this conference virtually. Yeah, it's not as fun, but do we want to fly 20 people from around the country, around the state, around the world to come somewhere? And because, air travel is one of the biggest drivers of climate, global warming and all sorts of other climate change issues. And so, yeah, I'm also glad that you brought up, too, the 1.5 degree Celsius change that we're talking about, too. We're trying to avoid the most catastrophic
That's right.
impacts. Yeah, we're trying to limit the possibility of our species going extinct, and to whatever extent we can, also limiting how many other species go extinct, So, yeah, this is obviously a very complicated issue, which it kind of always is when you have, business and profit involved in a situation talking about the survival of our species.
We've got blinders on as a culture, certainly as a Western culture, about flying places and convincing ourselves about the importance of flying places and quote unquote being in the room. Now, I want to talk about being in the room just a little bit more, but you're absolutely right. This is, I think we're just maybe 5, maybe 10 years from now of people saying, what the hell were you doing? Flying everywhere as often as you were. Mm-hmm. I think this is only heading in one direction. It's insane that not only all these people flew there, but can you imagine how many private jets flew there?
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. But while I was talking with her, and it was late at night there, early morning here, she said, I got to tell you, just a few minutes ago, I just got an invite for some FaceTime with the Bezos people. And I said, the Bezos, as in Jeff Bezos? And she said, yeah. She said, the largest environmental NGO on the planet is the Bezos, environmental blah, blah, blah. It's a $10 billion commitment or whatever. It turns out that they were, here's the phrase again, in the room when Mayor McLean was talking in a smaller group of mayors about connection to our rivers and foothills, et cetera, in an urban setting. And it turns out that that's in line with some of their theme, the Bezos people theme. And they said, okay, it was great meeting you here, but we'd like some FaceTime with you. So I thought that was pretty interesting because these are people with fairly deep pockets, and we could talk about Jeff Bezos, good and bad, all day long too. Yeah. But you never know, right? Because there's a number of things that seem to be out of our reach, right? That seem getting Amtrak back. That's a no-brainer, you would think, but it just always seems to be a little bit out of our reach. Really getting some kind of downtown circulator, right? Through downtown up to the depot and even to Boise State on a regular basis. Getting the people out of their vehicles, for God's sakes. We talk such a good game. But what does that take? God knows it won't take the Idaho legislature, so it may take some private funding. So I was kind of intrigued by that.
I'm sure that she was thrilled to have them ask about, foothills and that kind of thing, because that's where her bread and butter, that's how she started getting involved in city government many moons ago. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what were the actual things that she was talking about? You're going into this conference with all of the politics wrapped up around it, the business politics, but what were some of the climate things that she actually was talking about that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, she was talking about this net zero goal for the city of Boise. And there's the city of Boise, capital C, capital B, which is to say City Hall, right? And then there's the city of Boise, which is all of us, right? And how do you get from here to there? And that's, I'm always interested because that's a really ambitious goal. So a big part of her presentation, and she gets very practical, by the way. You're spot on with this. This is where she can go off her notes and really talk because it's in her DNA. This is where she really understands, some of the issues. So it's electrification of our buildings, electrification of our fleet, but then it's talking about the Boise River and all of the work that we're doing with that, the recycling of water and the ambitious goal that we have with that, and then everything from pesticides to leaf blowing, and then just making EVs just a little bit more practical. But every time I ask, are we going to meet that goal? She said, well, if it wasn't a stretch goal, what's the point? In other words, if I said yes, what's the point of having that goal, right?
We'd have to move it again. Yeah.
That's right. So, and kudos to her for saying that. I guess what I'm saying is there's a number of things that I think that the mayor can be conflicted about on any other day, starting with public safety and being just a little tone deaf in some of the communications that come out of the office. But when it comes to this, and she can throw away the cards, if you will, she can usually connect. And I think, quite frankly, that led a lot of people probably to choose her in her most recent reelection.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a huge thumbs up. Like she told you, I'm here because this is like what Boiseans are talking about. This is some of the most important issues that Boise is facing. So let's get into the zoning code, which to me is very interrelated, obviously. It's been in place for a week as of today. Obviously, things aren't going to settle out for a while. The new zoning code is going to apply to a lot of new construction, new projects. And so we're not going to really see the details, the fine print, how it will actually run out. But this is an exciting turning point. You've talked about how exciting this is, how emotional this multi-year process has been. What are you watching for in the first few months of this new zoning code's implementation?
On day one, there were 17 applications that came in. We average about, like significant projects, and they average about 9 a month, right?
Wow.
So I thought that was pretty interesting at planning and development. They are still cleaning up the language in the code, which is very wonky. They cleaned up some of that language over the last few days. I listened in on a meeting of the Historical Preservation Committee. And just as a refresher, this is a separate committee that has to give the green light to any alterations, changes, or elimination of historical structures in historical districts in the city. It's really interesting, and quite often those meetings are so specific. And in other words, it's a change of windows, it's a change of a garage, things like that. One item that came before them late last week was a home, a single-level home that was built in 1950s, almost like ranch style. It's a duplex in the North End, not far from Hill Road. And the owners, now they're not even developers, a couple bought this and have rented it out for years, came to the Historical Preservation to basically wipe out the home, just demolish the home. But it's actually 2 parcels of land, and to build denser apartment units, 2 separate denser apartment units with ADUs on top of them, and set them back further away from the sidewalk. In other words, it's like, hold it. I felt like I was in a design review meeting or a planning and zoning meeting, right? But their argument was, is this structure really that historical, et cetera? So the people who live next door and across the street, they testified against, et cetera. But this couple, and they basically said, well, we've owned it for like 20, 30 years, and we were and then when the zoning code came through, we understand that, that's not who we're talking to right now, but that really inspired us to do this because we have a couple of sons who are now of age who are choosing where they're going to live or not live and whether they can afford to live anywhere. And so we're actually going to have them, live in each of these, but they're also going to be landlords. And so I thought that was really interesting in that it was very personal. And all of a sudden, the commission said, well, we realize that the new zoning code isn't really official yet, and, projects will probably come, whatever. But to the person, they kept quoting the new zoning code about their reasoning for approving this, by the way. I don't want to bury the headline. They approved this. I mean, this is a pretty big deal. So we're talking about, a destruction of a home that a lot of us have passed probably 1,000 times in the North End, just a, rental property to build two rather modest, but again, more rental property, dense rental property in the North End too, and so and they also asked for, and this gets really wonky. They asked for, can we please put metal roofs on these properties? Now, to you and I was thinking, okay, big deal.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that's not really kosher in the eyes of the historical preservation, but it turns out metal roofs are much more sustainable. And that was their argument. And the committee said, yeah, sure, why not? It was
interesting.
It was, I guess, it was just a vibe of, gosh, these are new conversations, right?
This couldn't have happened any time in the last 60 years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for all of the talk of people saying, hey, we're really not going to see the effect of this for a good 18 months to 24 months, I think it's already part of the conversation. And what I'm interested in is, what is this igniting in some people's brains? And the fact that there were like 17 applications where people deliberately waited until day one of this new zoning code to put in. And my guess is probably every one of them has something to do with density.
Not to use this term, but it's going to trickle down to also, mom and pop kind of places. And that's really, okay. That kind of makes me rethink it a little bit.
Yeah, and by the way, one other thing in that same meeting, so the Catholic diocese came before them in a presentation to build a pretty good size, I think 4 or 5 story building where Baird's dry cleaning used to be. It's not far from the co-op.
Yeah.
And they wanted to build a pretty good sized diocese building with a lot of offices, et cetera, because it would be kitty corner of the large Catholic church in Boise's North End. And the committee said, gosh, these offices, they seem awfully spacious. Do you really need to be 5 stories? It's like, and then someone said, I don't know if this really, is in the spirit of the new zoning code. And they actually deferred that, and the Catholic diocese holds a fair amount of sway. And they said, no, I think we need you to go back to the drawing board. So it's like, wow, it's already impacting decisions.
The switch is already flipped.
Yeah. I'm very intrigued by that. So, I'm very wonky and I love listening to these meetings, et cetera. But my sense is like, oh, wow, it's there and people have been waiting to have these conversations.
Yeah. It feels like we need to rethink so many things that it is a breath of fresh air, that it's like, maybe this is actually happening. Maybe this is actually working. But I mean, I talked to one of the new city council members, Jordan Morales, a while ago. I asked him about the zoning code rewrite and how he felt about digging into that. And one of the things that he said was, it's going to be an adjustment period. Like you said, they've already made some recent changes. But he was like, we've got a bunch of new city council members that it takes a while to get used to sitting behind that desk. And also, I mean, we have a huge new document that was decades needed. So it's going to take a while. There's going to be some kinks in it. So what are some of the pain points that you're expecting over the next few months?
I think the pain point is going to be meeting or not meeting people's expectations. And one of the things one of the real kitchen table issues that I think emerged from the public hearings, et cetera, was the public needing, not just wanting, but needing more communication about pending projects in their neighborhood. And what defines a neighborhood? Because as you know, There are rules that say you have to communicate with people within, I don't know, X number of feet or something. Like it's kind of a ridiculous thing. And so the zoning code actually, number one, expands that. I'm not sure what the number is, but number one, it expands that. But number two, I think it also requires at least one other level of neighborhood input on design, et cetera, before it gets any kind of approval from design review. So I think that I honestly think there's no such thing as bad communication. The more, the better. But my sense is it'll probably still have, a limit, whatever, X number of feet that is. So I think that some people might be disappointed that it is not as grand as they hope it will be. And then I think there's going to be just a lot of people who just get uncomfortable with change. Because a big part of this new zoning code rewrite is fast tracking. It actually is fast tracking a lot of other projects. In other words, if your proposed development meets the criteria of what that zoning code is already in print, what are we doing wasting all this time doing steps 1 through 4 when we can skip all the way to step 5? So, Question number 1, what part of public input are you losing along the way?
That's a very prescient point with a lot of the frustration with the zoning code rewrite over the last couple of years has been Mayor McLean's main contender. One of his big points was that neighborhoods hadn't been able to provide as much input in specific areas that they wanted to. So
I don't know if you can ever provide enough input.
Right. Yeah. And you're not going to satisfy everybody.
Yeah.
And I think it remains to be seen how some of the political frustration and the opposition to the zoning code rewrite. A few weeks ago, they reject Boise upzone. They really put it down. They said, we're done with this. We're going to move on to other issues. One, obviously, Boise voters made their voice clear in what they wanted, which was the zoning code rewrite. But also, I guess we'll see. I don't really have a good guess yet as to how some of that political frustration is going to manifest moving forward, whether it's within the zoning code rewrite or in a month they're going to pivot to something else entirely to be talking about. But by that time, we'll probably be talking about the legislative session anyway. So we'll have moved on to something else too.
So we know that there are 18 exceptions to the code as written. I would hope that they will just keep adding to that. That's my hope. Because you should only get smarter.
And it's a huge document. There's always going to be edits to it. Yeah. Well, let's move into our favorite topic of the week, and especially our favorite topic of December.
Always.
What are you watching? What movies are you seeing, and what are you excited to see come out?
Well, let me talk a little bit about what I'm seeing and where I'm kind of conflicted on recommendations, because I think I think a number of people will ask me for recommendations, and I actually do give recommendations for a living sometimes. 2 of the most provocative movies of the year and most talked about movies of the month have to be Saltburn and May December. And Saltburn currently in the cinemas, May December streaming on Netflix. The performances in each of them, and they are very singular projects, by the way, are some of the best performances of the year. Can I recommend Saltburn to everyone on the planet? No, of course not.
That is the question. Yeah.
Right. It's I would hope that a discriminating consumer has some sense of the story and of the creative team behind the film. But I was sitting in the little cafe at the Flicks a couple of weeks ago when Saltburn opened, and just having a latte, and a number of people were coming through, and I'm always asking, hey, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? And a couple came through and they said, oh, we're seeing Saltburn. And the guy said, oh, I heard it's like Brideshead Revisited. And I had seen Saltburn. Yeah, I'm thinking, oh, crap, because I think someone wrote that. I think someone like the New York Times or something wrote it's a cross between Brideshead Revisited and Talented Mr. Ripley. And I'm thinking, boy, you haven't even scratched the surface on this.
The Talented Mr. Ripley, but
but a taste of that, right?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, because And then if you start describing the provocative scenes in this film, and there are more than a few, you either get the ick, response, or, you get the arched eyebrows. And it's like, and I don't think that serves any purpose either. But it's so, I think for a discriminating moviegoer who has broad taste and is looking for something provocative, etc. And I have to think that it is one of the best movies of the year too. I really do.
So the director, the writer, Emerald Fennell, she's talked about that. She said, this, I'm not, one of her favorite quotes that I watched because this is one of those movies that like afterward you're like, you either have to do a deep dive and like be like, what was she thinking? Like, what was going on? Or you just never want to think about it again. I wanted to think about it again. Yeah. But basically, she was just like, I'm not trying to be a good person. I'm trying to make a movie about desire. I'm trying to make a movie about... She described it as sticky, which I think is very appropriate. It's malevolent and just awful in a way that is... hard to describe, and I personally it's kind of refreshing that it's like I can't recommend it to everyone, because I had a similar experience where my boyfriend and a friend and I went and watched it at the Flicks, and then we got out and we were all just gonna split ways afterwards, and we were like, hey, we gotta talk about this, guys. We gotta go sit down. And
isn't that the best part of a really good movie?
Exactly.
Right?
That's the point of it. I agree.
Yeah,
so we're standing in line. We were just going to split ways, but there were new movies coming in, so there's a bit of a line at the Flicks, and we were just trying to decide what to eat while also just kind of being a little bit shell-shocked, which I love that feeling. And there's this couple in front of us who, turned around and was like, what did you guys just see? And we were just like, Saltbird? And they were like, we were thinking about seeing it. Can you recommend it? And I was just like, no, but also like if you want to go sink your teeth into something that will really grip you, go see it. I think it's a good one.
Right.
You recommend? I haven't seen May December yet. I really want to.
I think it's flawed, but I think Natalie Portman, this is one of her best performances.
Okay, love her. So yeah, that's exciting.
And her character makes a lot of awful choices.
You recommended a while ago, Next Goal Wins from Taika Waititi.
Yep.
I just went and saw that this week. What a joy. It's definitely, it's a sports comedy.
Right.
But it's also Taika Waititi doing it. You have a lot of gender and, colonization conversations going on within it.
Yeah.
So for someone within my container of thinking how much I think about queer and trans issues and just people and gender just generally, I mean, I'm just always thinking about it, and especially living in Boise. But I think that this is a really good movie for if you just want to see some like good trans, and specifically it's within the Samoan tradition, Fa'afafine representation. It's really, I don't want to call it heartwarming because that makes it sound a little bit condescending, but I don't know. It's really lovely, and I think a lot of people we need to see it.
And I think it's a side door movie. I think it sneaks in a couple of lovely messages, and I think that he is brilliant in trying to draw in an audience that normally would not go see a movie with those themes. And for some reason, critics have not plugged into this film, and I love this film because I think it's, number one, it's thoroughly entertaining. And what the hell is wrong with that? And it's good for a laugh. I think it's a killer soundtrack. I love the setting. And it's like, take me somewhere I've never been before. And that's what it did.
I'm excited to see Maestro.
Can I talk about that for a second?
Please do. Because so TikTok is a fire with concerns about, they gave Bradley Cooper a prosthetic nose that actually is larger than, so it's just like, there's like, is this anti-Semitic? Like, what's going on here? But the actual film itself does look like it's going to be really good.
It is really good, and I have seen it.
Okay.
So as a matter of fact, I'm going to be hosting we do an NPR movie night. I'm going to be hosting that next week, and it's sold out, by the way, like in 24 hours. And a big part of it will be, got an exclusive clip of Maestro, which will open the next day. So Netflix sent me an advance copy. It is brilliant. And I think that there's a lot of people out for Bradley Cooper for all kinds of reasons. He is the writer, producer, star. He's Warren Beatty, right? He's Woody Allen.
Yeah.
He's Orson Welles. And by the way, it's a really, really great film. And he also affords an opportunity for Carey Mulligan to give one of the best performances, not just this year, but any year. So I grew up with Leonard Bernstein as a pop culture personality, etc. I adore his music, but he was a very controversial figure, intense genius, and it's a capital G with the genius. So again, I think it's going to share a story that a lot of people don't know, and at the centerpiece is this amazing marriage. So Carey Mulligan is the real star. And by the way, this thing with the nose, Leonard Bernstein's children, his family have said they've signed on to this movie in such a big way. They said, no, that's exactly how Dad looked. Like, leave him alone. Okay. That's and it's a very affected voice, right? So people are going to say, "Ooh, what is this voice that Bradley Cooper has?" It's him to a T. His estate, his family, his heirs, his everyone has said, "Yeah, it's like that's him." Like, what's up with this? I got to admit, I was expecting to hate it, but I really liked it, and it kind of surprised me, much like A Star Is Born surprised me.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, real secret, Sarah Silverman as a supporting role in the film. She's fantastic as Bernstein's sister.
I didn't know she was in that.
Yeah.
Definitely excited for that one. What are your thoughts on Wonka?
I have not seen it. The advance word is that it's really good.
I know.
It's an origin story.
Yeah, I was putting my foot down. I was like, I'm not going to watch this.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, it has Olivia Colman in it, so maybe I will. And then, everything. I mean, Hugh Grant looks a little, I don't know what CGI they've done to him, but it's a bit of a joy. And I feel like that is kind of the energy for the rest of December is, let's just get a little weird. Let's just have a little bit of fun. So I guess I'm going to be dragged to that. But thank you for joining us, George. It's always such a pleasure. And I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure. And thanks for the invite.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia and Grant Irving. I'm Blake Hunter, and I write our Hey Boise newsletter. Our music is by Eppas the Downasda. If you enjoyed our show today, share it with another movie lover. We'll be back on Tuesday with more stories from around the city.